So I should give it as this. So I just leave it here. That's good. Let me see. Is Commissioner gonna go first? So this is right now showing on.
Yeah.
I'll put on mute. What's up?
Commissioner. We're ready, yeah. I don't know, ask the board chair. Frank. We're gonna go ahead and get started in respect of everybody's time. My name is Leslie Grijalva. I am a public affairs specialist with the U.S. section of the International Boundary and Water Commission. Thank you to everybody who took the time to be out here today and to our board members that are in attendance and those that are joining us virtually. We're having some technical difficulties, so I'm gonna have to sit up here and manage the presentation from here. But today's meeting will be moderated by our co-chair, Mr. Anthony Stambach. But I wanted to just go over some preliminary logistics for those that are here in attendance and then some instructions for those attending virtually. So for everybody here, there is a sign-in sheet that's going around. Please make sure that you sign in for us. At the beginning of the meeting also, we were displaying our new QR code that is our electronic way of signing up for our mailing list. But at least that way, if you put your information on the sign-in sheet, I'll be able to send you notices of meetings like this for the future. If you are attending virtually, you should be able to see the screen, the presentation that's on the screen right now. If you need to call in, you can call in using the following number. The number is 1-872-240-1286. The meeting ID is 2502-9514 and the pound sign. If you navigate to our webpage today, to our Citizens Forum page, you will find a link to the information for today's meeting, including a link to all of the presentations that are going to be shown here today. If you have trouble finding those, you can also have the choice of emailing me, and I will provide those to you as well if you need them. We have a pretty robust agenda today. So our first presentation is going to be given by Commissioner Hined, but I wanted to go ahead and just formally hand the meeting over for moderation to Mr. Stambach.
Thank you very much, Leslie. First of all, everyone, welcome to the Citizens Forum. Fellow members, good to have you here. Thank you, Commissioner, for making the trip down to El Paso to be here with us today. On our side, we'll start with the board members, just kind of giving a general introduction and, I guess who we're with. I'll start with myself, so I guess go counterclockwise. And then after that, I might ask that we start with the public and kind of go around the room. My name is Anthony Stambach, and I'm the general manager of the Hidalgo County Irrigation District Number 2 in San Juan.
Father signs without associates.
Jim Barley, Region and Water Planning Group.
It is a Valley Memphis Missions Education Center.
Hi, I'm John Goolsby. I'm retired from USDA and I work on invasive species of, weeds along the river and so forth. And I've been on the board for 15 years, I believe.
I'm Bella Garcia. I'm an environmental project manager for LNG Engineering, and I'm here representing Willis County.
Frank Martinez, I'm the Deputy Regional Manager for the IBA's Rio Grande.
Michael Kent, General Manager for the Dominant Irrigation District.
Roy Allen, General Manager, Delta Lake Irrigation.
Melissa Gonzalez Rosas, that Assistant Director for Community and Economic Development for the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development.
And I am the board member. Keith Patridge with McAllen Foreign Trade Zone, McAllen Economic.
Mark Tepsia, McAllen Economic Development, McAllen Foreign Trade Zone.
Guess we'll pass over this way.
Isabella Canava, I'm the Principal Engineer for USIBWC.
Craig Harmon, General Manager for Cameron County Irrigation District Number 2.
Isaac Solomon of Hidalgo County.
Tudor Yule or Chairman of the Board, Rio Grande Valley Sugar Growers.
Jeff Charles, private consultant for small business, and I guide them into the federal purchasing market and make sure they understand the federal mandates that go along with those contracts.
Arturo Cabello, Brown Irrigation District.
Umi Ivana, RRP Engineer.
One in the oil program of the Texas Mass Naturalist, that this comes for training here.
So, exciting, the Chief Security Officer of USIBWC. Everybody, John Riley, Realty Chief, USIBWC. Yeah, and for the hydraulic engineer, we also have Joey Bingham, Rio Grande Guardian, 496 State.
Ernesto Reyes, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Ecological Service, co-located here at the Santa Ana Water Refuge.
Well, that's my former mayor, current district judge, judge, associate of PIT engineering.
Robert Padova, engineering.
Elijah Gothams, Texas General Land Office. Mason Label, Stantec, Engineers.
Amber Sanchez, Board Report, CDS 4 and UC 23.
Media.
All right, thank you very much. I think that comes to everyone. We've got a good group of folks here today. I guess in an effort to stay in time, we're doing good. We can move on to the update on the minute negotiations, which Commissioner.
So thank you everyone for being here today. We have a couple of really relevant presentations for today. And one of them is based on what the board had asked for regards to our flood control projects. But I did want to start the meeting, obviously, because we do have low levels at the reservoir, at the dams, and also what's happening with the minute. We have some new members of the audience. And what's really kind of enlightening with today's audience is that we've become much more diversified than when before it was just the irrigation districts. And I really appreciate that because I think it's really incumbent on cities and other entities to be hearing this information. One of the questions that I get a lot from this region is, how do we make ourselves known? How do we advocate for ourselves? And what I do is I like to highlight the example of the San Diego area. They've done a terrific job of coalescing mayors and utilities and, well, in their case, not utilities, but mayors in terms of advocating for expansion of our wastewater treatment plant. That brought them $300 million under the USMCA, but more recently, because we have a plant down in San Diego that's not operating correctly. It's a federal facility operated by the federal government, not meeting the federal law. And because of the advocating that they've done for us, they actually got our construction budget tripled. Okay, and when our construction budget for the entire border was about $50 million a year, and it went up to $150 million a year, because it was really important that we put resources into that plant to rehabilitate it, because it makes no sense if our plant's not meeting our discharge permit that's required by the federal law, right? So what we have today, what Licena's going to talk a little bit about right now is where we're at with water deliveries. And then I'm going to talk about the minute. And then after that, we're going to have Adrian Cortez talk about the data. Okay. One of the questions that I had, and unfortunately somebody's not here, but I give him credit or I give him blame, because he's not here, right? Is that when I had my first stakeholder meeting down in the Rio that some of you were at, one of the questions that was asked to me at that time was, we're always talking about Mexico, what's happening in the US, right? And so what we decided to do and that's what Adrian will be talking about after, Licena's presentation and me updating you on the minute, is where our data's at, right? We're making our data public, so that you can have, access to that data. And why are we making it public now? Is that we've started now to do for the first time binational, modeling of the watershed, of the Rio Grande watershed, specifically the Mexican side of the watershed. And I'll talk a little bit about what we have on the US side. So that's one thing. The other thing, is then after that, then we will have, Dr. Bora do a presentation on the flood control projects, right? There is still a significant need in flood control and raising our levees and closing our gaps. And he'll be able to talk to you about that, right? So given that, let's go ahead, Isela, let's have you start with the first thing on the agenda, which will be the status of deliveries.
Just move the mouse over to the screen.
That's my change.
Move to the right.
Right.
Okay. For water deliveries along the Rio Grande, there are two treaties of the USIBWC and two basins that the USIBWC works with Mexico on water deliveries. The first treaty is the 1906 convention. And in this treaty, the US delivers water to Mexico from southern New Mexico to El Paso. We deliver, or we allocate the amount of water to Mexico yearly based on the amount of water that's available. And the allocation is actually done by reclamation. The 1944 water treaty from Fort Quitman to the Gulf Coast is really what most of you are interested in. And this is where Mexico is delivers to the US in a 5-year cycle, 350,000 acre feet on average per year, per 5 years. Next slide. And this is the current cycle, the current status of the cycle. And as all of you are aware, status is not good, not positive. We are significantly behind on the expected minimum seasonal curve. The red line here is the line if Mexico were to be delivering 350,000 acre feet annually. The black line is where we currently are. The other lines are previous 5-year cycles. And as you can see, we are in the lowest that we've ever been. We know the situation is dire, and we've been working on a minute in order to provide new tools in order to get water deliveries, and Commissioner will be talking about that. Right now, the deliveries to date for this 5-year cycle have only been about 382,000 acre feet, and that's usually what we would want to expect in 1 year. So, and this is one of the graphs that's actually available on our water data portal, and Adrian will be talking about that and where to find that information. Next slide. This slide provides you the status of the combined storage reservoir, both at Amistad and Falcon. We, as most of you are aware, in 2022, we reached a low point where that was the lowest in history since the dams were built of joint storage of both Amistad and Falcon. Current ownership as of March 23rd is a total of 764,000 acre feet in both dams. For the US and for Mexico, we are have a storage of 593,000 acre feet. Right now, jointly, we're not at the lowest point. But the dams just keep the storage just keeps going lower and lower. Right now we haven't gotten any rain or significant inflows, and it's not looking good. The actual storage in Amistad is at a record low, but as many of you are aware, there was a significant draw or release from Mexico for about a month, where they moved water to Falcon. In our discussions with Mexico a few weeks ago in a binational meeting, they will not be making any more significant releases out of Amistad. They pretty much moved most of the water they need for their irrigation season to Falcon. So that is the information that they did share with us, okay? And this slide is also available on that portal. Next. We also have on our portal the status of the current dams along the basin. So anytime you can actually go in and see the status for your stuff. Along the dams along the Rio Concho, they have a 1.1 million acre feet in storage right now, and they're about 36.8% full. You know, most of us are really really interested on Luis Leon. And right now, I know it's hard to read, but it's about 89%. You know, and that is the dam that releases into the Rio Concho that provides water into Amistad. Well, actually spills. We get any water that spills over to Amistad. But a lot of these other dams are what feeds into that dam. And this is what we mean when we look at Rio Conchos. Now, the middle tribs, they're about 23.2% full. Right now, we're looking at Amistad at 23.3%, and Falcon is 21.4%. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Commissioner.
So as we saw in the previous slides, you know, they've delivered about 1 year's worth of water, and we're in year 4. You know, they're in arrears of about 700,000 acre feet, and they have 1.2 million acre feet available in their reservoirs. Now, one of the things that when we did on our last presentation was that we were getting a lot of questions from the public as far as where did the 5 years come from? What did they mean? And we have that video of that last presentation that we gave on our webpage, and if you'd like to see it, we can share it with you. But one of the things, we did a lot of research on how they came up with the 5 years based on Mexico's documentation, because they went and testified to their Congress. Anyways, to make a long story short, and this is one of the things that I want to start the conversation with today, is that they delivered, like he said, I mentioned, they delivered their water historically up until the 1992-97 first 5-year cycle, where they did not meet their obligations just with what they call wild water, whatever spilled over the dams. There are very few instances where Mexico would open their dams to deliver water to the United States. And that's a change we are working to make into how they manage their basin. But again, you know, making those types of core changes is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of pressure, and it's going to take a lot of advocacy from people like yourselves. Also, when you're working with your Mexican counterparts, to highlight that right now where we're at with the water levels, I mean, it is a very dire situation, and the likelihood of spillage from reservoirs is starting to become very, very small. Okay. So my predecessor, Commissioner Harkins, she had I don't know if I call it the privilege or the nightmare of negotiating the last 5-year cycle, right? That ended in 2022. And why was that such a critical cycle? Because at that time, the previous cycle, 2010 to 2005, Mexico had ended with a debt of 263,000 acre feet. That's 1/3 of what they're short right now, just to give you a perspective. And so according to the treaty, well, that's a little bit debatable, and I'll talk a little bit about that. According to the interpretation of Mexico by the treaty is that they can carry it over to the next 5 years. One of the things we're also pushing on, and this is some of the policy guidance I'm looking on internally, is that according to the treaty, there's got to be an extraordinary drought and serious accident, okay? And I'm doing a lot of historical research to see how in the past 5-year cycles, did we just sit by and say, okay, Mexico, you're just not going to meet it, just carry over it to the next 5 years, and you met the treaty. Well, no, to me, that's not enough, okay? I am really saying, I'm really pushing back in the sense that we need to kind of come to an understanding. Is it an extraordinary drought? We clearly have not had a serious accident, right? So those are kind of the big policy decisions that I'm working with. But I was mentioning minute 320. Now, just for those of you who aren't aware of what a minute is the tool this agency uses to make agreements with Mexico that are enforceable, that are considered a binding contract. So minute 320 was signed back in 2020, and it had in there that by December, that a new minute would be negotiated with the goal of getting it done by December of 2023. And that was to increase the predictability and reliability of the river for users on both countries. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit of what I talked about. You have multiple 5-year cycles, right? So the 1992-97 cycle was the first time Mexico, before filling of the reservoir, and I think there was one other one in the 50s, where they did not meet their 5-year commitment. And I know those numbers are a little bit hard to read, but it's about 1 million acre feet of water that they fell behind back in the 92-97 cycle. And then in the 97-2002 cycle, not only did they not catch up, but they also fell behind another 300,000 acre feet. So here in this region, a lot of you have worked in the farming industry and you remember these days, right? You remember the pain, you remember kind of the lack of trust, all of the satellite imaging that was coming out with regards to all the agriculture that was going on. And so then we went into a third cycle, and that actually, that's where they paid back the 1,300,000 acre feet. After that cycle, you had 2007, 2010, that was a 3-year cycle. And why was it 3 years? Because Hurricane Alex came. And Hurricane Alex is what started a new cycle. It filled the reservoirs, but then again, no more hurricanes, no more big tropical storms in the international reservoirs. Amistad and Falcon. The 2010, 2015 cycle, again, 260,000 acre feet were not delivered by Mexico, and that carried over to the next 5 years, So we have this long history of just with wild water receiving deliveries from Mexico. And not only that, we have the impediment in many of these cycles of everything that flows in, 1/3 belongs to the United States and 2/3 belongs to Mexico. So if they wanted to get 100,000 acre feet of water to the United States, they had to deliver 300,000 acre feet, right? So 1969 was the last time any major change has been done with regards to how water is managed in Mexico. There's been a lot of other minutes that have to do like with sanitation in Nuevo Laredo, salinity issues. Sir, this is not church. You come over here. But really, I put here 2020 was a new beginning. It was a new beginning. And so we are starting to have this new collaboration with this minute that we were hoping to sign back in December of 2016. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So I'm doing a little bit again of repeating stuff that I have in last week, because I see there's some new faces in the audience. But I think that one of the goals is bringing predictability and reliability, but we wanted to break that pattern of the 92-97 cycle, where it was constant every 5 years. We're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting, right? We also wanted to have a more structured framework of collaboration between the countries. Before it was, year 1, meet occasionally, meet year 2, meet probably less occasionally, and by year 3, things started to heat up, right? And so now we have a structured framework of meeting between the countries called a policy work group. We also started the first binational model, okay? And so that binational model, we got from Mexico, their watershed. We added our information. We are not modeling the US tributaries, but we do have information with regards to all of the rivers that are flowing into our into the Rio Grande, right? And that includes US waters as well as Mexico's waters. I think one of the other things that we really have this opportunity with Mexico is to show them the impact it's having to the region, right? That's why we're in year 3.5 or year 3, if you want to call, or you're into year 4. And we're starting now, we started last year with showing what some of these impacts are. And that includes the closing of the sugar mill, you know, kind of really moved a lot of people's cheeses, with regards to that. And so this minute is about growing the pie, and it's a pilot minute. So let's go to the next one. So pilot means it's for 5 years. These are just, I'm just gonna go very quickly what some of the elements in the minute are, is creating work groups that explore growing the pie, of a projects work group, an environment work group. We reaffirm the policy work group, which is where we meet twice a year to go over systematically what's going on with deliveries, and then some operational improvements. And I believe this will be posted somewhere so that you can look at it at your leisure. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so what do I call this? Advancing the status quo, recognizing that wild water was no longer going to meet the Mexico's obligation in water, but we actually came up with some other changes. One is that their delivery cycle was 5 years. It's not 10, it's 5 years unless there's an extraordinary drought and serious accident. Changing the management of the watershed. You know, they have to now start managing and thinking about managing Texas as a user. They cannot meet their obligations anymore with just wild water or what's spilling over the reservoirs. And then the new tools for Mexico is that they can provide greater than a 1/3 share. In other words, that 1/3, 2/3 rule, they can apply it at any time. If they want to say, United States, we're going to give you 50% of this water, they can do that, as well as do reservoir transfers. We also added potential credits in case they overpay. And then also consider deliveries from other rivers such as San Juan and Rio Alamo if it's to address a shortfall and the United States government agrees. And again, like I mentioned, it's a 5-year pilot. So I've had a lot of meetings out here. There's a lot of recordings that I have of this on our webpage if you'd like to hear more details. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay. So just to remind the group, this minute has been under negotiation since February of 2023. And through this group of what we call the Rio Grande Minute Team, that included the US section, the Mexican section, it included the state of Texas, specifically the TCEQ, as well as Secretary of State's office. And then for Nahua, we had observers, which was the Department of State and their Mexican counterpart. And we had at least 10 negotiating sessions with them to go point by point, word by word. And we had finished, the idea was to sign this December 16th. And this was supported by this hydrology work group that was building this binational model so that we could have science behind the decisions that we made. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so here's the status. So in December 16th, the minute was not signed. And so therefore, at that time, the state of Chihuahua and the state of Tamaulipas had objected to the minute. They took out a big an ad in Mexico City saying, don't sign this minute. We need to be at the negotiating table. In our case, we had state of Texas because they're our Conagua. They own our water, or the Rio Grande water, right? And so in their case, the state of Chihuahua and Tamaulipas, Mexico chose not to have them there because Conagua is the one who manages water there in the river. But even so, now we're here in the situation. They asked us to wait, Mexico asked us to wait until February to let them have those meetings with Chihuahua and Tamaulipas, and the last we heard, those meetings had not occurred. Okay, so given that, this has now accelerated up to higher levels within the Department of State and within the administration. I believe last week, we helped arrange a meeting with the Office of Mexican Affairs, Congressman Gonzalez took a group from here and they had a meeting with the Office of Mexican Affairs down in Department of State. And so they talked about, Peter, were you there as part of that group? No.
I got it.
Okay, well, you got the recording. I'll let you comment on that. Well, so they talked about, kind of the issue. And one of the things that when I was there, is it's scary confronting a room like this, right? I have this and I have this in San Diego, trust me. I mean, I'm having these scary situations on a regular basis, but I commented to Department of State, it's really important that you hear from the users themselves, right? So this, really, and then we got a terrific new person. His name is Max Hamilton and in the Mexico desk, real go-getter, uber smart, fully briefed on what's going on. He and I meet on every 2 weeks to talk about these things. And this next group that now is going up is not only having a meeting with the Department of State, but also the National Security Council. Okay, so it's starting to kind of raise up within the administration as far as the dire situation that's happening right now. We are preparing quite a bit of briefs with regards to this, so that they float up to the powers at be. So what are we doing? Okay, so with my Mexican section, I've been sending multiple letters saying, you need to sign first of all, you need to sign the minute, you need to approve the minute, immediately, and you need to apply the tools, and you need to deliver water. That's one thing. We received the authorization to sign the minute back in December of 2023. And the minute, from what we understand, is under the very highest levels of Mexican government right now. So it's apparently at the president's desk, but again, until we see that authorization, I mean, we are still pursuing that pressure. I've requested a plan from Mexico on how you're gonna achieve the shortfall. You telling me it's extraordinary drought is not enough. I want a plan, okay? So that's part of I mean, I have a lot of friends, but equally, it's getting tough. Let me tell you. But I still am gonna continue with, advocating for that plan, because we can't just sit here and just kind of let, the next year and a half go by and, with our arms, las manos cruzadas, that they say in Spanish. Okay, so, we've also informed Mexico of the increased risk as Amistad levels go down, right? And we start dipping below power pool. We're not quite sure what the situation is going to be as far as the outlet work, how it's going to affect the outlet works. And the reason I commented on this is because on the Colorado and Hoover, they have been doing some like structural type of modeling where they've seen that cavitation will start to affect their dam when they go under power pool. So this and they've had that experience already, and we haven't had that experience. So they're looking at old records and things like that. So those are the things that we're informing them of. We also continue to express our concern over the operation of their basin right now, right? You cannot wait for wild water to deliver. You are so far behind that it's really critical that that gap be closed as much as possible. Now, increased engagement from Department of State and National Security Council, I talked about that, but what is the increased engagement from Department of State? Well, they are writing to, they are starting to send letters to Mexico, asking for the signing of the minute, delivery of water. And so it's starting to really raise up within the upper echelons of Department of State. And at the request of stakeholders, I've been arranging meetings again with Department of State and the National Security Council. The other thing that we've done as well is we're also making all of our data transparent, and we're putting it on our web portal. And Adrian will be talking about all of our hydrologic data, because I think it's really incumbent on you as a community to really have the data you need to advocate for yourselves, right? I was talking earlier that there was a presentation done by Sunny Hinojosa that he put a list of all of the irrigation districts. This is the irrigation districts. And the rights for those irrigation districts is about 1.3 million acre feet per year. Okay, if Mexico were to deliver 350,000 acre feet a year, that would not be enough. There's other stuff that's going on. And so that's why we said we're gonna put all of our data, and our data is hydrologic data on both sides of the border. We don't know what's going up on the Bengals. We don't know what's going upstream, but what we do have is a hydrologic data, and that's what Adrian will be talking about. So the next one, I think this was the last one. Yes. And again, there's a QR code if you want to follow us. Now, why is doing this minute really important to us? Because that's the tools that we have as the IBWC. You know, Mexico is a sovereign country, and our tool is influence, is getting this minute done. Okay? And we ended negotiations back in December, but we are still very much engaged on getting this minute signed so that Mexico can deliver water, have the tools they need to close that gap in what they owe right now. The shortfall would be about 700,000. So with that, you know, I guess I move into questions before we get Adrian to talk about the data. Dr. Gould.
Commissioner, so do you think the hang up is waiting on the meeting with Tamaulipas and Chihuahua? Is that the hang up?
I think I think the hangup is the election cycle.
Is what?
Is the elections. Elections are gonna be in Mexico in June. And so right now, any type of movement can really cause a political battle. That's my personal opinion, not the commissioner of the USIBWC, right? Based on my experience. And so I don't know why they haven't met with the IBWs, with Tamaulipas and with Chihuahua, but that's my opinion. Just before back behind the computer. Okay.
When you met with, the people from the Foreign Secretary's office in Mexico or whoever it was with Representative Gonzalez, what assurances did you receive that the signing of the minute would be imminent?
Okay, so Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, okay, I wasn't there, but I was informed, and I got the readout from that meeting from the Department of State, because they had U.S. consulate people there, right? So Ambassador Salazar has also engaged on this issue as well. And so what the readout told us was that Secretary Babsanas, who's the equivalent of Blinken at the Foreign Relations Ministry in Mexico, committed to Congressman Gonzalez to sign that minute. He committed.
How long?
A
couple of weeks.
Yes. Yeah. Within a short period of time. That is correct. Yes, sir.
Commissioner, other than these futile negotiations with somebody, you're doing all the right moves. Our country's making all the right moves, but the other side, you have to have two to negotiate. They don't want to. Other than these negotiations, what other alternatives to water have you been looking at? And I'll wait till it's open forum where I can speak on what I came to speak on. But what other alternatives other than waiting for polluted water out of the mountains to be released into a polluted river, sent to our cities as polluted drinking water that we don't even know what to test for anymore with all the germs and disease and everything that's been going into that water? And then we're irrigating our crops with it. What other alternatives in water from the United States have you looked at, or has there been none so far?
So from the United States, right? So from a water quality perspective, I mean, we monitor water quality for the parameters that are necessary, and obviously there are some areas that we consider hotspots. We're doing another study right now on water quality, specifically salinity along the river, to determine where that source is. We partnered with TTQ and UT as well as the University in Mexico to get that done. So that's an ongoing study. So hopefully that will be helpful in determining those hotspots. But with regards to what can be done in the US, one of the things that I've done myself is that I've brought in other federal agencies into the discussion. One is USDA and Bureau of Reclamation, because I want to make sure that our cities and our communities and our irrigation districts are getting their fair share on funding that's been has been approved through the bipartisan Infrastructure Fund as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And so these are the things that I've been doing. The other thing, so is alerting it, hiring within other federal agencies that do these types of domestic work. I don't do domestic work, right? But that's my main focus with regards to that. Okay, but you want to wait till the end, so if we could go around.
Well, I want you, yeah, no, but I want you to finish what you're finishing,
What?
so I can say that,
Yes, and
because I even have a little PowerPoint.
okay, well, we'll leave your PowerPoint, we'll let the board chair decide where, if your PowerPoint fits with.
Okay, well, my mouth is also my PowerPoint, so don't worry. You can't handle it.
Okay, and if you would love to leave it, I would love to look at it. So anyways, any other questions on the minutes? Because I do want you to see the stuff that's gonna be on the portal as well as our flood control work that's gonna be done. Yes, Mr. Isaac, yes.
Commissioner, thank you very much for all your work. And the question I have is, if there are concerns with the content of the minute, what avenues are available for us to voice our displeasure before it is pushed for signature?
Okay, so obviously I've had lots of stakeholder meetings where I've had that type of input. And, we've taken some of that, that feedback and we've made certain changes to the minute already. If there are concerns that you have right now, if you want to send me a letter, I'd be more than happy to look through that. I don't know if I'll be able to change them at this point, but this minute, you gotta try something. This is a 5-year minute. It's not the end all of all minutes, and we're hoping that we will be able to improve upon that minute as to what we see what those tools are. But yes, definitely, if you want to write to me, I would be more than happy to read that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Because I do want you to see the data portal that we're putting together. I'm really excited about it because it really is going to allow others to start downloading data and looking at kind of the trends that are going on.
We have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is the logic of the 5-year deliver cycle? Does the 1944 is why 5 years to begin? So Maida, there is we did a meeting not too long ago at our last Citizens Forum where we explained where the 5 years came from, but just, and maybe you could put the link in the chat, at some point, or send it to the stakeholder group, that's on this, because I don't know if you can do it on here, right? But I guess the 5-year cycle was done based on some extensive hydrology that Mexico did, looking at their data from 1900 to 1943. So what they did was they were presuming that they would be able to meet their obligations with certain number of reservoirs in place and a certain type of rainfall that would come. And so they did all this modeling. It was on paper, obviously, there were no computers back in 1944, and demonstrated that they would be able to meet their requirements with just spill water. And why is it 5 years? Because the reservoirs don't fill every year. Okay, and Maida, we'll send you the link. There's that stuff that's on the that has that presentation. Okay, so are we ready to move over to Adrian? Mr. Chair.
Do it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Leslie, do I share on my end or are you going to be sharing on yours?
I'm going to share. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
It's not red. The red board.
This one.
One that's there.
Yeah, Adrian.
He's gonna share.
Okay, great. All right, so good afternoon. We're going to be talking about a data portal. So this is a product, thing that we've been producing over the last several years that's going to allow our stakeholders to get to the data that the commission has, because we have a very extensive record and history here, and we've collected a lot of stuff, and we're trying to make it easier for everyone, not just us, to get to that data and work with it. So a quick overview over here. We're gonna talk about our stream gauging program, the types of data that we send, as well as how to use the portal, some dashboards that we've created, which are sort of quick ways to look at specific topics, as well as Commissioner and Principal Engineer Canava was saying, ways to monitor the 5-year cycle deliveries that are made by Mexico with data as quick as we get it. So next slide, please. Okay, so to start off, we wanted to highlight really, on the left there you see a typical stream gauge. This is one up in the Pecos we have behind us, who are out there, pretty much every day on the river, taking scientific measurements to try and make the data as accurate as possible. So it's a large program that's boundary wide from, the Pacific Ocean. We have operated for decades. Next slide, please. We were actually given.
And I'm sorry, Adrian, just very quick.
Yeah.
Well, can somebody confirm in the chat that they're seeing, because we have multiple presentations up. I just want to make sure they're seeing it.
We are seeing the IBWC program, and when
Okay,
Adrian was
perfect.
speaking, we were following the right slide. Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So this is actually a program that was started under the commission. Back then it was IBC in 1932. So in the early 1930s, we established gauging stations all along the border, and we were responsible from that point forward for collecting a record. And the record really was daily flow. So a mean daily flow over time. And we've been running it for almost a century now. In total, across the border, we have about 100 commission gauges. These are gauges that are operated by the US section and Mexico. And along with that, there's also extensive network that's run by our partners in the federal government and through the Conagua agency for their reservoirs as well as river gauges. So it's a big program across the border that we've run for very many decades. The purpose that we have all these gauges are really for 3 things primarily. One would be the binational accounting. So this is the ownership in the reservoirs, tracking the deliveries from Mexico, or in other parts of the river, the deliveries to Mexico, like here in El Paso where I'm at, where we deliver water to Mexico under the 1906 convention, or over on the Colorado River where we deliver water to Mexico. The other important part of all this is that operation gauges. So these are gauges that we've put in important places along the basin, upstream of our reservoirs, as well as near cities and urban areas that will let us know how much water is going through that area and help us to plan our operations if we ever get back into a flood situation. So these were critical when we were doing Alex and very critical for all the hurricanes prior to that as well. And then also tracking the 5-year cycle. So Mexico has gauges on their tributaries that we monitor, and they go and have their own team of hydrologic technicians to go out and try and make that data as accurate as possible as well. And we have our team who are sort of checking on that as well. And just to reiterate, right, so while we've been running this program since 1932, a lot of our gauges were established in the late 1800s to early 1900s. So that's, as Commissioner Hinaro was saying, when they were doing the studies for the treaty prior to signing, they weren't just guessing or, looking at a basin map or things like that. They had actual data behind what they were doing using similar processes like we are today. That right there map on the map that you see there on the right, that's a dot. That's a dot. So each one of those dots is a gauge. The red dots are external agencies, so those would be like Conagua and USGS. The blue and yellow dots are commission gauges. So these are the ones where our staff are out there collecting data. Next slide, please. So what type of data do we actually collect out there? So there's really 5 primary things that we're collecting. One is water level, and this is actual river water level. In those pictures on the right, you can see the measuring sticks that we have in the river at our gauges, and those are our source of truth. So as you can see in one of those pictures, you actually have staff out there reading the ruler to see how high the water is, and that's what we calibrate our data against. And then we have scientific instruments that are out there also recording 24/7, every 15 minutes, what is the water level? Using this data allows us to calculate discharge. So just as you saw on that very first slide, we have staff that are out on the river measuring flow. We use that to produce a relationship to calculate discharge. So this is a procedure that we started in 1932 and have been doing ever since. The other thing that a lot of our gauges has is a rainfall sensor. So this is something like a tipping bucket that's just seeing how frequently the rain is dropping, or other places where it's actually weighing the rain itself. At our reservoirs, we're measuring the height of the water behind the pool, and then using that information, calculating the storage and area, which is all surveyed every 10 years. With the most recent one done in 2014, and we'll be doing another one in the next few years as well. The other thing that we do have out there is real-time conductivity. Our counterparts in Mexico have gauges that they maintain that are collecting conductivity data on a regular basis, and we'll be adding that to the portal very soon as well. Next slide. Just to sort of give you an idea of how the data actually gets to us. So from the field there at the left, you see that gauging station with the long staff and series of antennas. Those are actually being shot or focused on the satellite, the GOES satellite, which collects all sorts of weather data. You can see, pictures of the Earth right now live from the GOES weather satellites, and it has a lot of different sensors on there. But one thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is that it also has an extensive gauging network that's supported by it. There's roughly 40,000 platforms across North America, in Mexico, in Canada, United States, with federal agencies, local agencies, and various stakeholders who are using that to transmit data from the field. So this could be a snow sensor out in the middle of Colorado that's measuring how much snow there is, to one of our river gauges, to gauges that are used for fire support, so to figure out where the winds are coming to alert firefighters of where the fire's coming in, to weather stations measuring wind, humidity, soil, those sorts of things. So it's a very big program that's being used across this country and our partner countries as well. Once that data is sent to the satellite, it comes back down here at headquarters, which is received by that satellite dish. And then we have software and databases that's constantly parsing and monitoring that data to get it onto the web portal that we'll be showing shortly. Next slide. And it doesn't sleep. It operates 24/7, nights, weekends, floods, every single day. So the portal that we're going to be talking about is hosted by the USIBWC. And as I said, it has external data as well. So it has data from the US section, the Mexican section, the Federal Agency of Conagua for the reservoirs, the USGS, and the Bureau of Reclamation for the reservoirs that they operate within our basin. And it's updated every 15 to 60 minutes as soon as the data comes in. So it's all manual, it's all automated, not a manual thing. It's giving you the best available data at every second. And their overview, we'll go into a live demo in a second, but just that's sort of the map interface that it gives you so you can see where our gauges are and the breadth of our footprint. Next slide, please. Things you can show with the data, so you can plot the data over time, so you can see how high has it gone over the past 6 months, last month, whatever you want to choose. It's all selectable. You can see how often our guys are out there. So every time one of our staff does a field visit, they come back to the office, enter in their information, and a little green dot shows up on our portal. So if you're curious or wondering, when was the last time our guys were out there, it's easy to see. It's also a lot of data, right? When you're talking about 30 years of data or 100 years of data, the value at midnight 30 years ago may not be of much use. So we have statistics like what is the mean for the day? What was the value at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. or what was the min or max? So these are all abilities built into the portal and things that we are also calculating on the fly. Next slide, please. Dashboards. So there's a lot of different ways to look at the data, and we have some dashboards that we've created that help us in monitoring what's going on with the system. And for you guys would also give you access to a lot of the same products that the commissioner was just presenting, with the status of the reservoir, the status of deliveries and things like that. So those two blue and green lines that are kind of hard to see but are sort of going towards each other into an arrow tip, those are the international reservoirs where Mexico was releasing water down to Falcon. So as one dropped, the other rose. So that's something that we were monitoring while they were making those deliveries. There's also a section on weather report. So we rehost a lot of information that's posted by the National Weather Service because it helps us as we plan our operations as well as monitor hurricanes and things like that for us to see where the water is, where it's raining, and or if there's any hurricanes that we need to be wary of. Next slide, please. And monitoring 5-year cycle deliveries. Just after this, we'll sort of get into a demo so we can show you live. But here you have the option to see, you know, where the water is. Has it rained? Is there any change to what Mexico is doing and things like that? So most recently, you see there's a bit of an orange spike. So it rained on the Rio Salado, which flows into Falcon. So that's why you see that peak right there. It's not a lot of water, but it's some. And then on the right there, you see a dynamic digital version of that same graphic that PE Canava showed earlier this afternoon, where you can actually go in there, drill into the data, and track it along with your mouse button. Next slide. And we also wanted to highlight that there is an option for English and Spanish. So not everything will be translated on there, but a lot of it will be specifically the, you know, the buttons that you press and things like that. So that can help for our region since that's an important parameter. And we'll show how you can switch between languages and get that sort of support shortly. I think we're going to go into a demo next. So I will share my screen so we can show you, you know, how you get to the website and sort of a quick overview of how to get through it and navigate and try and find the data that you're looking for. And give me a moment to share my screen. Let's stop sharing. Wrong monitor. Okay, so you can get to the web portal from our website. When you first go into here, there's going to be a button down here that says Water Data Portal. If you're looking at sort of our legacy pages, like active gauging stations, let's go here to, right. So here you have your our old images, which is just the PDF that we produce every hour. Or we can click on a specific gauge. So let's say we want to look at Rio Grande City, and they will take you directly to it. But if we go back to, if you're just navigating to our top level page, right? So you're going to be presented with a welcome screen, and this is just an overview description of what's going on that you can read at with your leisure. We also have some links that we've created to sort of quickly get you going along to say, you know, I want to see what type of data there is or what are the names of the gauges. So you click on that link, it'll bring you to a map view with the names of the gauges, and you can start zooming around, looking at the different things that you want. As I said, we do support Spanish to a certain degree, so we have that same welcome screen translated for you. And then to actually switch over to Spanish, you would just click on this globe icon and click on Spanish. and it's asking me to translate it, but no. And a lot of the stuff will be here, like tableros, mapa, lista, location, things like that. So not everything will be translated, but some of it will be. From here, so I'm here at the data. You know what? I just want to see what sort of data do you guys have. So you can click here on flow. So here's our flow data, latest value as of, let's say, last 15 minutes to an hour in CFS. If you're more comfortable with CMS, you can select different views like this. So this is the latest discharge in CMS, and you get a very colorful display because we have binned it statistically to say whether it's normal, low, below normal, above average, things like that. Unfortunately, generally we're low to below normal for the majority of our gauges in this region of the world. If you're not interested in discharge but want to look at something else, let's say you're concerned about the stage of the river, so the depths in your gauges, you can click on gauge height. Or if you're just concerned with the reservoirs, the elevation of the reservoirs, that would be Amistad Falcon for those two. Or anything else in the list. As we said, there is dashboards, right? So 5-year cycle deliveries. That same product that Dr. P.E. Canava had shown, right? We have links to the graphic there as a PDF. So you can click on that, and it's that same thing that was just presented. Or if you want to look at it a different way, we have this product here. So you can start actually tracking and saying, and comparing between the previous cycles. What are the values? What were the cycles over here in the future? If you want to just focus on this last year 4 of the cycle, you can zoom in or zoom out. If you just want to start clicking stuff off, because I know I don't want to look at these early cycles, you can just go down here, unselect them, and it's going to start filtering. So you're just looking at these ones more recently. There's also this little blue dot right there. So if you hover over that, that is our latest deliveries as of Saturday, March 23rd. That's the last time we updated, and we'll be updating it again sometime this week. And we'll be working with Mexico to get more frequent updates. I'm going to be in contact with them to try and make that a more frequent, so it's not just a weekly update, but a daily update at the minimum. If you're just interested in, you know, the volumes that are arriving. So this just shows you over time, over the last 30 days, where the water is, or if you're interested in specific gauges, this shows you the flow. Ones that are blank just happen to be, we're not able to calculate any values because of how low the water is at this time. So once we start seeing water again, it should start producing data. It's just an effect of how we do our systems. Other ways to look at the data would be the map that we often present, which just gives a overview, a graphic that's updated every day around 9 to 8 a.m. That just gives you a status update of what the reservoirs in this basin are at. So here's where you can see that Luis Leon is currently at 88% and about 200,000 acre feet. If you're interested in what's going on in over time, we have a dashboard for that as well, which give us a second because it gets a lot of data. So here you can focus on the Conchos Basin. So this is all the gauge reservoirs on the Conchos Basin. So if we wanted to zoom in over the past month or so, you can see here it's starting to dip down. And that's simply because they've started irrigation deliveries in there for their users. And we have the same for the other basins. So these are the basins between Falcon and Amistad. And then for the reservoirs downstream of Falcon on the Rio San Juan and Rio Alamo, which, as you can see, not much has occurred, even though they do have a pretty significant amount of water. These gauges on the right just show how relatively full they are to their storage content. So Luis Leon is a good example where, because it's at 88%, anything in the orange is their flood pool. And we would also expect that to be delivered to the United States because it would go over its spillway. The other thing, of course, would be weekly ownerships. This is something that we're going to be continuing to improve and get better so that people can understand where this data comes from, as well as giving you access to the data more than just 1 week, but the previous weeks. But this same data product is here available for review to see, what is the ownership for the United States and Mexico. US is at 22.6% versus 23.5% for Mexico as of our last accounting on the 23rd, which I believe is also information that's sent out by the watermaster to the users to inform them of the status as well. Not pertinent to you guys, but we also have other gauges and basins that we operate. This would be the Tijuana River Basin out west that we have created a dashboard for as well. As you go through here, there's a lot of charts that we have canned if you're interested in just what's going on, in the lower Rio Grande main stem, if that helps you determine, when the water's arriving or anything you need to be concerned of during a flood. This sort of canned graphic has all the gauges that we monitor in that region of the river. And there's a long list of them, much longer than we would ever go through here. One thing I do want to highlight, right, is you can contact us. There is a link on there that says contact the USIBWC, which will open up a email address to us. That does go to me and the rest of the members of the team. It is monitored, so if you have a suggestion or there's not something that you want to see, you want to be on there, or there's a better way that you'd like to see the data, we're glad to take that into consideration. There's also a link down here that says contact us. And a lot of times it's not just the data as it is now, but you want to be able to do something with that data. Maybe you have a study, maybe you're from a college or a university nearby that want to start reviewing that data. There is an export function, and we've created templates for a lot of uses. So if you wanted to export all the data from the Amistad del Rio region, you can go through here and it lists the extensive data, the periods of records for all the data, so you can save it as an Excel or CSV. Or if you just want to start with your own, you can just start adding gauges here. So if you want to look at Brownsville as a search and you want rounded data, you can just go through there, add, hit download, and it'll produce a file for you to download. And there is the last 7 days, just because that's what it defaulted to. It's a very quick overview. There's a lot of power here. If you're an advanced user and you want to do, you just want a monthly value that's last 30 days monthly value, and you want an average over 30 days, or maybe you want the volume. Total in cubic meters. It will do that calculation for you and give you data. But that's probably a more advanced feature.
Well, we're hoping that some of the academics here will get to use this information with regards to what's available as far as all of our gauging stations. As you can see, we have a lot of gauging station information that may be useful in making the certain decisions. But I don't know if there's any questions on this or the data or anything.
Can we see the Luis Leon data again?
Yes, if you wanna go to that. So, yeah, now you can see yourselves, you don't have to wait for these presentations for us to tell you how the reservoirs are doing, right? So I think that, that one of the things that you see, it's pretty full, Luis Leon, right?
Why is that stay full?
Well, first of all, it's pretty small compared to the other ones, right? But, I don't know, they haven't shared with us why they made those decisions. I'm keeping my fingers crossed because they tend to make some deliveries once the minute is signed, right? But they have not at all commented on that. Adrian, is it typical for Louisiana to be filled like that?
It is not. We had those recent rains, I think, a year or two ago, and it just stayed relatively full since then. But it's not something can be planned on.
Is there irrigated farmland right?
A small area.
A small area?
Yeah, there's a small area around there, right? And
Yes.
that reservoir is really important for flood protection for Okinaga and Presidio, right? So if there was a flood, we definitely don't want that, right?
Are there gates for them to be able to release water or it just spills?
So they do have an outlet, right? They do have an outlet, Adrian, there?
Yeah, they do have a small outlet. It's about, give me a second.
Right, it's not very big.
700 CFS is about the
Right.
max they can get out of there.
Right.
Right now, I think they're doing about 10.
We have gauges that notice for the Pecos and Devils River, and how far do they go?
So, the question is, Adrian, do they have gauges for the Pecos and which is Pecos? Devils and, yeah, and the Pecos River, and how far north do they go? So this is really interesting because I guess some of these, USGS has these gauging stations pretty far, I don't know how far north, but go ahead.
Yeah, so really easy way to look would be, so we'll zoom in on the Devils Pecos region. So USGS has gauges that go all the way up to the headwaters, the snowpack area. I'm bringing in a lot of their data because we're interested in it specifically for flood purposes as well as a water analysis. So I go up to here, this gauge here, it's downstream of Red Bluff. So I bring in their data, and then past this gauge here is when the IBWC takes over.
And how far back does that data go, Adrian?
Our gauge, if you take everything in the region, goes back to about 1900.
Oh, 1900, and on the Pecos, and the other ones that you showed, how far back does it go?
The USGS gauges are newer, so it may just be a few decades.
Okay, and ours do go back to 1900 in that area?
Yes, if you look at, you have to sort of duct tape a lot of data together because unfortunately fortunately, we built a reservoir where we had a lot of old ones. So those red dots there you see are historical gauging stations. So if you use the Devils, for instance, right, we had one that was called the Devils at the mouth. And then we built the dam and we had to remove it because it was going to be underwater. So it ended up being moved all the way up here. So that's why for the Devils and Pecos, you have to sort of duct tape a bunch of different data sets for different periods together to get a full record for the 1900s to present.
But you could download the data.
Oh, yeah, you can download the data.
Yep.
And that's free, that's why we wanted to put that out there, so you can have access to that data, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and
That's
to
a
that
question.
point.
I know.
Hold on, Adrian. Go
I
ahead.
know.
Okay.
Regional Water Authority wrote a letter in 2014 to state about what's the flow there and effect on the reservoir systems, and we never really received anything back from the state except it's almost like none of your business. Which it certainly is, because we keep focusing on 350 a year from Mexico, when we got different sources of water, and on the United States side, it's affecting us too. So.
Right, and that's the type of analysis that could be done with this tool, is for you to look at kind of what's going on in your basin, right? And if you're advocating for yourself, and don't get me wrong, I don't want you to walk away thinking that I'm not, it's all on the US side. My job is to advocate and get that water for Mexico and to continue advocating for that water. But if you're advocating for yourself as communities, don't lose that opportunity to bring down other federal agencies, because a lot of the members of Congress can bring down, other federal agencies like USDA, Department of Interior, to have those discussions, to look at what's working on their programs, what's not. On the Colorado River, under the Inflation Reduction Act, they got $4 billion, right? Of course, there's 40 million people there, and it's across 7 states, but that's the point of this, is so you can advocate for yourself. And
How many billions is that?
40
what, billion?
billion.
Okay.
Or 4 billion, 4 billion, 4 billion, 4 billion. for the Colorado River under Inflation Reduction Act, right? So, I mean, the intent is for you to have a tool, right, for this data.
I had a question on the last meeting that we were at. There was some data presented about, I guess, reduction, or it seemed like there was less flows coming from some of the US side. Was that using the data from the portal?
Yes, right. So Adrian, you want to talk a little bit about how you determined kind of those reductions on the Mexican side, but also on the US side overall, using this data?
Yep, we can talk about that. So, to answer the earlier question about downloading it, right? We talked about templates. So there's one called Rio Grande Tributaries allotted to the United States. And we've gone ahead and populated that with all those data sets. So as I was saying for the PECOS, right? It's piecemeal from 1900 to 1954. You have this gauge from 54 to 67, and then this gauge from 67 to 2024. So that's where I was talking, you need to duct tape them together. The other thing that would be missing there is the reservoir inundated several springs, which is a value that our division calculates, so to make sure that the US is getting its allotted fair share of the spring flow. And that's not currently on the portal, but we'll be adding it in the very near future.
So we do this data before this data because our water counting has to determine what water belongs to whom, right? And, you know, 2/3 of the water coming in from the 6 Mexican tributaries belongs to 1/3 belongs to the US, but all of the other water, the unmeasured flows are 50% US and the other 6 tributaries are 100% US. So that's how we calculate what's in the reservoir. So that's why we measure all of these things. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, so what we did was we took the same exact data and started doing analysis, averages over time, the last 30-year average and things like that. And that's what we were presenting at that last meeting, to showing there's a decline. And I think you're going to be seeing more about that from us in the near future, in the next few months. So it's something that we're working on, that Commissioner has tasked us with doing additional analysis on.
Yes, Tudor.
I was gonna ask, when Mexico between 1939 and 1944, they were modeling what their basin would produce and what they would hold in future reservoirs.
Right.
Was there ever any contemplation of the third reservoir being built on the Rio Grande that was talked about in the treaty, the third one?
Right.
Was that included in the data that they used to determine how much water we could hold, our 350,000?
Was that in there in the modeling that was done by Mexico, Adrian, the third reservoir? Or did
They did not. So they first, I mean, they had an idea of where they're going to put some reservoirs, but they didn't have a exact plan where everything was going to be installed. So they had to make some assumptions.
like the modeling, but the modeling was only using the projections of where their reservoirs were going to be, or did they also include the international reservoirs as part of that?
Just their reservoirs. So they were looking at consumptive use that could be used by those reservoirs, as well as the storage in those reservoirs that they were planning. But they did not account for the international reservoirs.
US didn't account for them either.
We haven't found, and Adrian, you started to look on the US side to see if there's any sort of documentation with regards to that. Based on a request that we got, you haven't found anything as far as the US, right?
For the Devils and Pecos and the other tributaries,
Right.
no, we have not. Just the gauge data that we've put on here is what we have so far, but not assumptions on use or things.
One point during the negotiations, the diplomatic letters that were going back and forth and the communications with the State Department, they thought that they would be able to get a minimum of 1 million acre feet
Right.
to the US
Right.
from Mexico, and then somehow that got whittled back to 350.
Right. So that was part of the negotiation, right? So, but getting back to the use of the data, if you guys are working with some of this data and need some assistance from us, please let us know. Because again, this is just pure, data that we're getting from our gauging stations. We do have a process for quality controlling that data, and verifying that it meets, the rigorous standards of data, right? Yes, sir.
Mentioned, future, you'll be adding some more data like conductivity. How soon would that be available?
So our conductivity, they said, we mentioned that we're gonna be adding like conductivity or some other, I guess, water, any other types of water. Are we gonna be putting in, water quality data with regards to this on there? I mean, I guess we could if we're taking samples, right?
So a few steps there. So the water quality in general, like the data that's collected by our Clean Rivers program, which is executed by us for the state of Texas, the data exists. I believe it's just in spreadsheets right now, and we do have the intention of adding it to the portal at some point in the future. It's just, it hasn't occurred yet. For the sensors for conductivity, I need to verify that Mexico is still operating those gauges. I'm pretty sure they are. We made some recent upgrades and those weren't included in the upgrade process, so I just need to add them back in. So it could be a week, it could be a couple of months, just depending on the status of their gauges.
Any other questions on this data before we go on to the flood control project? And again, if you need anything from us with regards to that, feel free to do any requests, these guys are really quick with kind of managing that.
Commissioner, you said there's a QR code
Yes,
that's there, or is it because I'm trying to get it, but I can't? I'll get it from Leslie, because I'd love to put that on our website.
yes,
Sure,
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. If you want to get on our newsletters or have your contact information to get well, the big thing is our newsletters and our announcements. We have a QR code there. We're trying to create a database on it. Okay. All right, very good. Why don't we move on to Dr. Bora? Oh. Oh, okay. Okay, so Congress.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you sound good. Yes.
Okay, all right. I wasn't hearing you all. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to meet with you all and speak to you about the status of the Lower Rio Grande flood control levee system. My name is Ramon Macias III. I'm the principal engineer for the engineering department for the U.S. section of the IBWC, and I'll be giving the update today. And I do have Dr. Bora, who's our hydraulic engineer, that's there available to answer any questions on the technical side. I do have staff on online as well to kind of help us through there if there are any questions. We can go to the next slide. So before we get off of what I do want to and get into the topic of flood control, I want to kind of give a brief summary and update, or a brief quick summary of what the agency does. What our mission is, what our vision is. We were established, as Commissioner and Adrian mentioned, and P. Canal. We've been around for a while, and it's something that's new to me as far as coming into the agency about 3.5 years now, and I'm still learning just how wide and expansive our program is along the border, and how important it is, as Commissioner mentioned, to really advocate for your areas, to try to get the fair share, if you will, of the pie, so that we can get the projects going and moving and funded. We're a binational and international organization that we're pretty much set up to apply the treaties between the U.S. and Mexico regarding boundary demarcation, national ownership of the waters, sanitation, water quality, and of course, flood control in the border region. Our vision is to become recognized as the premier agency that identifies these solutions, and we're moving definitely in that direction. I think everyone can see with the commissioner's commitment and that flowing through to the staff of really moving, making information available so that you all can see the presentation that Adrian gave really outlines where we're trying to get to so that that information is there. You can see the information. It's out there for you to use how you need, and it really helps in creating that dialogue between the stakeholders and us to be able to answer any concerns, any questions that you may have. Next slide. So this really just kind of highlights, this slide just kind of highlights again what I had on the previous one. The mission is to demarcate the land boundary, preserve the waters of the international boundary on the Rio Grande and the Colorado River, protect the lands from floods. This is where our update is going to be on today. And of course, the other things that we do in there that I'll show on the next slide also. If you go to the next slide, please. Again, we're responsible for applying the boundary water treaties between the U.S. Mexico. Those responsibilities, again, are boundary demarcation, water ownership and delivery, sanitation, water quality, flood control, international dams that we own, especially in the lower Rio Grande. We have the hydroelectric plants that we also operate. We've got 11 field office, and we're headquartered in El Paso. And we're a small agency. As Commissioner mentioned, our funding for the entire border, it was just recently tripled because of the stakeholders advocating, particularly for the area in San Diego and the plant, to be able to get that funding so that we can then use and actually work on the items that we're working on that are important and concerns for the constituents, cities, water districts, the protection that we provide for flood control and the whole works as we do that. We're a small agency that covers a long area, and I'm really amazed by our staff of what we're able to do with the funding that we have and get the work done that we've been able to get done so far. Next slide, please. This slide is really just an overall view again of the treaties and the excuse me, the initiatives that we have and projects throughout the boundary all the way down from San Diego down to Brownsville. Of course, our area that we're going to concentrate today, there's the lower right area, the project area that we're going to be talking about, lower Rio Grande. Next slide, please. So again, some flood control background. We have already rehabilitated several sections of the lower Rio Grande flood control project. A lot of those levees, we've already upgraded those, and I'll get into the presentation. I'll show you some of those areas that we've already done some of the work and submitted some of the documentation. We're continually working on the design and construction, and as funding comes available, we're trying to get all that whole area then kind of built up, protected, so that we're complete through that. But again, there's still a lot of work that needs. We've done a lot of work. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Our levees are designed in the area and throughout to protect from the design flood, which in some areas is actually greater than the 100-year flood. And I'll get into that a little bit later as well. And as we do the design and the construction, we provide the as-built drawings, construction drawings, and documents to FEMA for the accreditation. That's what we're trying to do, is make sure the levees are designed, built, maintained, so that they can be not only certified by us as the owner, but also then accredited by FEMA, obviously for insurance reasons through there. Next slide. So some of the things that we have to be aware of are the definitions that are used as we're designing and constructing and working on our levees and our flood control protection system. The levee is defined by 44 CFR 59.1, which is the Code of Federal Regulations area that defines these things that FEMA is responsible for. A levee is a man-made structure, usually an earthen embankment built of dirt, designed and constructed with engineering practices that will help contain, control, divert flow, and protect from temporary flooding. And a levee in a levee system is a flood risk reduction structure as a whole, as a system. Next slide. The important thing to hear is the definition of the levee is the actual framework of the levee itself, but then it's a system that is important, because FEMA will only accredit levee systems. They don't accredit individual levee reaches, and that's important. Where advocating as a group to get these reaches accredited is important, because they won't do it piecemeal. A levee system is a flood control or a flood hazard reduction system that consists of a levee, levees, associated structures such as closures and drainage devices that, when operated using sound engineering practices and methods, will help contain those temporary flood situations. Next slide. The accredited levee system is a levee system that meets the requirements of 65.10 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which is basically the mapping of the areas protected by these levee systems and protection from the 1% annual chance flood, or what we call the 100-year flood, or what maximum flood will happen in 100-year within the 100 years. The maximum design flood that we're looking at. Now, FEMA doesn't own or operate or maintain or inspect the levees. We, as the owners, certify our levees and then submit the accreditation documents to FEMA. They will accredit the levee system. Next slide. So as the owner, I mentioned again, we're responsible for designing, constructing, operating, and maintaining the system and the levees, and having that in place. And we certify saying we have met the requirements as identified under 44 CFR 6510. Again, what that is that FEMA will accredit the levee system to the 1% chance of the 100-year flood, and will be shown on their flood insurance maps or flood insurance rate maps. And then the important part is it's just not us working together, but we need to make sure that we have a local owner or project sponsor that must be responsible and submit the entire package, because it's ours within the levee system, the flood area within the Rio Grande and the border. But there's also interior drainage that needs to be accompanied with it, that the two going together, then as a local sponsor gets to FEMA, that's where the final accreditation is going to come from, as both go together. We're in advance by the fact that we have already submitted several of the documents already for several of the reaches, but we still need that component from the local sponsor to be able to submit the interior drainage packages to complete it so it can be certified. Next slide, please. So here kind of gives you what the requirements of that CFR 65.1. And what it outlines is that when you're mapping the areas, it takes into account freeboard, the closures, the embankment protection, settlement, interior drainage, as I mentioned, and other design criteria. As you look at the graphic on the right, it kind of gives you some of those components and what those terms are. Excuse me. So, what we want to make sure and protect against is one of the components is overtopping. Overtopping is basically water flowing over the top. We want to make sure that the levees are tall enough to ensure that water doesn't overtop, and you've got to have the required freeboard. And freeboard is just a term that's used to define the vertical distance from the top of the 100-year water surface, or the design water surface, to the top of the levee, typically about 3 feet. Some of our rehabilitation projects are to raise that levee height to make sure we have the right freeboard. Another item that we're looking through there is seepage. And seepage is basically going through and or under the levee. It's typically an earthen levee, earth dirt levee. So water flowing through there, if it's starting to seep, can pull that material out, and you can get failure, flood, and potential issues with that. The foundation is important as well, because what you're building on has to be something stable, that you are making the levee that's going to provide the protection against the water on the riverside. With that, we also have to be concerned with any type of slope failures that again comes into account, that you have the right configuration and the right amount of mass so that it doesn't slide when you have that force of the water pushing up against the levee. And also, under the foundation, making sure that it's stable, that seepage coming up underneath that, it's not starting to bring any of that foundation that will allow it to fail and boil up on the other side. What you normally see is, seepage water kind of dribbling off on the side, or you'll see boils coming up on the side, on the downstream side of it, on the land side. Those are concerns that we have to be aware of as our operation and maintenance crews are going through there and maintaining the levees and the floodplain and so forth. They look for these things to make sure everything is operating correctly for the protection, for the flood control protection. Next slide. So some of the documents that are required to be submitted, hydraulic models, the associated reports, the final design reports, and the drawings, geotechnical reports, operation and manual and maintenance manuals, flood emergency and operation manuals, levee inspection reports, as-built drawings. That's kind of the complete package that we would submit under our responsibility as the levee owner. And that gets submitted to FEMA for review as part of the package. The rest of it is the internal drainage that reports that have to come from the sponsor that complete that package. And one thing to keep in mind, and as I'm going through the presentation, you'll see some of the areas that we've already submitted. There's documents already in there because we don't have the information that they've been accredited yet for various reasons, that we may have to update some of those reports, such as the O&M plans and emergency flood out POCs that may have changed over time, and make sure that latest information is in there. Next slide. So with the levies, again, we're required to follow the FEMA criteria when we're building these levees. We're required to have the right freeboard that we're through in there, and then the design flood in the area of the lower Rio Grande reach, flood control protection reach is really over the 100-year flood. So we're actually protecting higher than 100-year flow because of the fact of what we designated by minute of what those flows are. And I'll show that in a little bit later in a little slide. And again, I have to reiterate is we're not responsible for the interior drainage. That's where that cooperation and partnership has to happen, where we have a sponsor that'll take our documents and then the associated interior drainage documents that are developed by the sponsor go together for that accreditation to happen. Next slide. Now, for the area that of the Lower Rio Grande, the USIBWC levee exists from Las Peñitas to Brownsville in 5 distinct segments. And it's what's above Anzalduas Dam, the section between Granjeno to Westlaco, Westlaco to Rangerville or Brownsville, and then Brownsville down to the Gulf Coast. Next slide. So here, I'm looking at, and we're providing a graphic of the levees above Anzalduas Dam, and the colored lines up there. And it's kind of hard to see, understand. And these presentations are available, so you can see the drawing of what the limits are. And it has a table in there that says, where are we in the process? And it's the next slide will show the blow up. But we've submitted the documents for the certification part of it for this area. Next slide. That's just the blow up. And we'll see the status is we've submitted certification. It hasn't been accredited yet. And these have been submitted since back to that date. And that's something that we need to go back and start updating this, because we've updated, I believe the last time that this slide has been updated was in 2018. So we need to go back and catch up and see if there's any differences that needs to occur. I don't believe that we've gotten notification that they've been accredited yet because of the interior drainage hasn't been completed through there as yet. Next slide. This is the area that's showing from Granjeno to Westlaco. Again, same situation. There's a lot of different levee segments, both on the U.S. side. Well, on both sides, we're showing the levee pieces and parts that make up the levee. And the next slide will show the blow up of where we are in the certification. Again, we submitted a lot of these documents already. At the time, these were in construction, so I believe they're done, but we have to go back and finalize and see, because there was a point where a lot of the work was the DH levee wall work that was designated when they were building the levee wall. So the levee is actually a flood wall or a combination embankment and flood wall. And when the work stopped, they closed it up to protect it, and some of that work has already started to come back in when we started up again. So we have to catch up and update our tables here. Next slide. Same thing here from Westlaco to Rangerville. You'll have the same situation, identifying the levees and identifying the certification process. The next slide is just going to be the blow up of the different reaches. Next slide. Let's see, here we're going from Rangeville to Brownsville. Same thing, we're identifying the levee system as it's moving down the Rio Grande. And this one isn't broken into many segments, but we'll see the blow up on the next slide. Again, that area has been certified. Next slide. Brownsville downstream, to get to the area from there about 12 miles that has also been certified in that process. Okay, we go to the next slide. Here's where we talked about that, we're really above the 100-year design flood, and these are the design flows that were adopted under minute 238 for the various reaches and what happens from each reach as you're moving down from the Rio Grande to Rio Grande City, the reduction in the flow because of storage within the channel. From Rio Grande to Peñitas, what the flow is coming through that area, Rio Grande to Peñitas. The diversion to the main floodway at Anzalduas at 105,000 CFS. And then we go to 130 on the Rio Grande at Hidalgo, Reynosa. And then how it splits up there, that kind of gives you the outline of the different flows that were adopted or that were adopted by the minute that we're protecting against. And the next slide will kind of give the graphical picture of it. Next slide, please. Yeah, that just kind of shows the picture that takes us from roughly 270 miles of levee from Falcon working all the way down, 143 miles in the floodway, 25 miles in the Arroyo Colorado area, and then 102 miles along the Rio Grande. And how it distributes and how we're developing and working on our different segments going through there. Next slide. One of the things, and it's important, and the presentation by Adrian is the modeling and having that information and the data of what are the flows and how are they, what's happening through there that we kind of work with to get an understanding of what the situation is through there, so that we can make sure that what we've built and designed as we're modeling through there is actually, doesn't change, the flow patterns, the sedimentation, and anything associated with that. So we have a project now for the hydraulic modeling and sediment accumulation and flow capacity analysis that is underway. In this, the contractor is required to conduct cross-sectional surveys, hydraulic modeling, analysis flow from the main floodway into the North Floodway and Rural Colorado, develop the floodplain maps that we'll have available. And then will also help us with our designs and whatever areas that we're missing to make sure that either those designs that are done, or if we're going into design, making sure we capture what the latest information is. The contractor will analyze sediment volume accumulations and impact on the flow capacity. As with anything else, you build the process, and you build the Rio Grande has its flow patterns, but if you get the sedimentation, then it changes your flow pattern, it changes your capacity. So we need to know and be able to know what the sediment loads are and how we're going to address those and what needs to be happening, which that leads a lot of information to our operations side on how to move the sediment, get rid of the sediment, and so forth. And also make sure that the structures are protected from that loads of the sediment coming up against them. Next slide. Again, this project is right now is at about 30% complete. The contractor is the Stantec, one of our IDIQ contractors. He has completed the cross-sectional survey from the main floodway, North Floodway, and Arroyo Colorado. And right now we're reviewing that data and then to see how it is against the existing modeling. And then we'll start modeling. Next slide. So kind of the areas that kind of are we haven't completed yet. We showed a lot of them on the previous slides of work that's already been done. From Santa Maria to Los Indios, the levee rehabilitation. There's a 12-mile stretch there that the design is ongoing and it's in its final stage, and it includes the 4 gaps that we're showing there: Willisey, Santa Maria Canal, La Feria, and Adams Garden. And we're getting to the point of the final design. We did have to descope some of the work just because of trying to figure out what is the best fix in there. There's different ideas of how we should put our levees in. but there's also a significant cost impact to those at almost to the point of tripling the cost, or at least doubling for sure. But we're expecting to finalize the design in this area by September 30th. Next slide. Again, here just kind of the brief design project that we're talking about here on the 12.5 miles from Santa Maria to Los Indios. Excuse me, we started in September. The contract amount, we're hoping to get into the final design stages. And you know, again, some of those examples of why it's taking so long is the fact that we're looking at and meeting with the various irrigation districts and trying to align how we have that protection. And so we have to make sure that, and obviously, you know, at this point, you know, the funding is a big issue, and then the scheduling and trying to get the funding, but also making sure, because at this point we don't have the authority for, you know, contributing funds to help if there's such a situation, if that opportunity arises, so that we can move forward. But at this point, it's all federal funding that's anticipated, so we have to really be careful on how we and work with the ability to get the work done to provide the maximum protection that we can with the funds available. Next slide. One of the projects that we actually completed here just recently is the Edenburg Levee rehabilitation. The project has been designed and has been constructed and is complete, and a substantial completion as of November 1st. Right now, and the reason we're calling it substantially complete, while the physical levees in place and all the erosion protection, everything is working and in place, you know, we're keeping it substantially complete and open because we have to make sure we have the vegetation established. And then once that's established, then we can say the project is complete. So that's an ongoing monitoring of the vegetation and the establishment period through there. And once we get those as-built completed and reviewed, we'll start putting the packages together to submit those to FEMA for their review while the internal drainage part of it is also working. Next slide. Another real important project that we have and looking at is the Upper Brownsville Levee Rehabilitation, located in Brownsville, and it's to stabilize the levee slope and floodplain there, and that's that purple curve in there. And it's, you know, we have the design, but it's an expensive construction project because of a real detailed and difficult design and construction that's inherent to protect that slope. So what happened is there was a flood and the levee slumped, you know, and right now it's stable, but we want to go back in there and make sure that we rehabilitate that section to protect it and keep it protected so that it continues to work as it's doing so far. At this point, we continue to monitor. We had a monitoring program in place. We're doing the monitoring now, and it's stable. But the intent is to go in there and install soil mix columns and stone columns to stabilize that slope and that structure around that curve. Next slide. Now, here's kind of the big picture, if you will, of the levee gap locations. These are locations that we still have the gaps that we're trying to close. As I talked about earlier, it's a system, and we can't do it piecemeal, so we have to close those gaps. And here are the gaps that are still needed in red, that need a design, that are associated with it, that we still have to program into our program to see when we can get funding to start doing the design and then move toward construction. We have some of these already that are ongoing. They're on the lower left that are still in the review process, either finalizing, working with the irrigation districts for the MOAs to be signed so that we can have the agreements in place to move forward with construction. And then also making sure we have the funding in place to move on into construction. Some of those designs have already been completed. We want to move into the construction phase. We have to get the construction funds sent so that we can do the work. And then we have some of those construction areas already completed. Next slide. Again, some of the speed bumps on the accreditation process. Interior drainage is one of the speed bumps. You know, the interior drainage is a requirement that FEMA has, and only the local sponsor are the ones that can do the internal drainage, because we don't have that authority. Our authority is within the USIBW right of way. So we're completing everything that we can within our right of way. we turn that over, we turn it in, and then the local sponsor has to be able to get in there. So, and here's the advocation that is really needed is getting that local levy certification sponsor, either as a group, well, becoming together as a now not unionizing, but at least coming together saying, for this area, we're going to be the local sponsor, and we'll try to submit all of our packages to get through there, or agreeing that maybe one of the districts takes the lead to cover the whole area. There's a lot of conversation that need to happen between the local sponsors on how that gets to the point of being able to continue to move forward. You know, another speed bump is the levies crossing political boundaries, essentially meaning, you know, we're crossing counties, cities, municipalities, irrigation districts, and that's where just certification by one for their particular piece doesn't work, because it's a system. It has to be grouped together. However, the local sponsors can be there. Continuing to work and close these gaps, you know, close these gate structures and intake areas that are still open. Next slide. We're continuing to work, and we'll continue to work as funding is available, resources available for the levy design and the construction, prioritizing those levy sections that hopefully we'll get the best bang for the buck and get those two first. Hopefully, if we get the money, we can really work a lot of it or most of it together. But again, it really comes down to prioritizing which is the best bang for the buck as funding comes down. Also working and seeing which are going to be more helpful for the interior drainage and how they work together to get those studies in place. We're going to continue to do our part. That is our responsibility within our own, as we own those levies, get those projects done, design the documents together, submit it to FEMA. So that process is done. The second process of the interior drainage then can follow on and complete it, and hopefully get to the final accreditation. Next slide. Again, we're going to continue working on those. Continue working on it. And one of the good things that we've had is a good working relationship with FEMA. They understand and know that our data alone is not going to be the accreditation, but they're willing to take our data so they can start giving us advanced comments, and we can address those comments. So whenever the second part of the internal drainage and the local sponsor comes online, then we'll already have our part done, and hopefully they'll be able to move together faster, quicker, sooner. And we're gonna, that's the good relationship that we have there, that they're able to take our documents and actually start looking at them and not just say, you know, they could say we need to wait, and that just delays everything. But we have a lot of that stuff already submitted, so that's working. And it's a good thing that we'll be able to continue to do that. Next slide. We do have those maps, not quite as interactive as Adrian's, but they're available at the site. And again, the presentation will be available to everybody. And if you are interested, next slide, we will have, you know, our questions for any of the technical type questions. Our Chief of Construction, and Andy Andrea Glover, and our civil engineer who's responsible for the Lower Rio Grande, Jose Vela, are available and can answer any of the questions. And of course, if you want to become and get the latest news and stuff, there's our QR code, and follow us on the X and LinkedIn.
All right, I think the one overarching message here is that, you know, we're about $170 million worth of funding needed to reach those urgent and medium priority gaps. But the other thing is that an effort with FEMA to get certified is really a local effort, and anything we can do to help facilitate that, like Dan said, Ray said, is that you know, we have a good relationship with them. We're getting the comments back, but anything we can do, because your communities will not get their flood insurance reduced until that FEMA certification, you know, moves forward. And I think there was a question on Hidalgo County with regards to FEMA accreditation for the pump house land site. Are we still behind in getting you FEMA flood maps? And I'm not quite sure if we're capable, we have that capacity rate to answer that.
Not at this time, ma'am. We'll look into that, and we'll provide a response.
Okay.
I just, a question on the gaps. Y'all identify the priorities, like, right, which one is high, which one is
Right. Yes, we do have them prioritized. So this year, where they're going through all of so right, this year we have $156 million for construction. A portion of that's gonna go to our San Diego plant, but they will leave us a nice sums to see what additional gaps we can close. They're building a recommendation because we have to get our operating plan in. And so we'll share with you which are the ones that were selected. Definitely Brownsville is a real priority, right? Because it's right in downtown, it's right by the port, we've got to get that gap closed. That is like the number one priority. I can share with you right now.
And at that location, there's all kinds of traffic.
Right.
It's a hotspot.
Right.
Down the levee.
Right.
Driving off the road.
Right, and the other, and that's gonna make it very expensive. It's very small, but it definitely, there's gonna be a lot of associated construction costs associated because of the complexity of the parts, for sure. For sure, we're keenly aware of that. Okay. So I don't know any more questions on this or any other good presentation before I hand it off to the chair for public comment. Yes, yes, Mr. K, Michael K.
Going back to the photo
Uh-huh.
of the gauges you all have, what kind of trend analysis can you all do with it?
Okay, since Adrian's still on, did we lose Adrian? Okay, so
I'm
the
here.
question.
I'm here.
Okay, Adrian, the question for Michael Kent is based on all the data that we have, is there a trend analysis that we can provide to them or we can do with that? Because I know we've got we've got a certain type of software, right, for the model. Go ahead.
We've been doing a lot of analysis internally. That's the homework that Commissioner has given us. I believe that as we work on that, we'll be sharing that with our stakeholders in forums like this and other meetings similar to what we had back in February.
And I think one of the things we want to do is also share with TCQ as well, right? So that they can quality, we can give them the opportunity to give us input. But I guess it seems like we can do like trend analysis, like looking at the decrease or increases in flows from a median and average perspective over time and decades and go ahead.
You actually reminded me of something very important that I missed on the portal. And my apologies, I lost the list of topics I wanted to cover shortly before we started. So one thing I missed. Let me show you guys it because it's pretty cool and it answers that question.
So I guess the portal, you can run the certain, okay.
Yes. So one thing I did want to highlight was the levees, right? So on the right here, there's various layers, GIS layers that you can click on and off. And that includes our levees, the international boundary. If there's weather going on that you want to see. So here's a radar map of the stuff that's coming in right now or where it's going to be raining within the next week or so. All that's available on the portal just here on the right side. But talking about trends specifically, so let's focus on the PECO since that's been a topic of discussion. So I'll go to our current gauge, which is here. Sorry, let me get my bearings. PECOs at Langtree. So we're looking at some mean daily data because that's the one that we have data from 1967 to 2024. If we just chart it really quick, on the right here we have this colorful bar called percentile band layers. So if we click on that, we're going to get actual, and I'll turn off the max ones to make it a little bit easier to read. But this will actually do those trend analysis for you. We already have done a few here. We have for the last 30 years, last 10 years, last 5 years, and then for period of record. So if we did period of record, you click on that, you can see where the flow as it is today, where it compares to our history, right? So here we're dry in this 10% to 25%. So a very low number. So that's on the portal, at least. This is one way you can start looking at the data to say, right now, where is it about? And that's on there. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. I think, but if you need us to provide specific information, if you start having a little bit of trouble, we've got the request there, and we can definitely give you data that will be useful. Again, you know, so you can have data so you can advocate for your region with regards to the needs and with regards to your needs in water, right? Because, you know, the whole reduction in water is impacted by Mexico's deliveries without a doubt, but there's other factors that are going on as well. And we want you to have that data so that you can advocate, you know, with the federal agencies, the state agencies, you know, as the new legislative session comes on. These are the things that hopefully collectively all of you guys will join hands and actually go. And that's what has made San Diego very successful. Okay. All right. Yes.
Work with, does it have, environmental changes through time?
I don't think it's got environmental changes through time, right? No.
If you could define environmental changes by time or through time.
Deforestation, no.
Oh, no, nothing like that.
Species.
Yeah. Yeah, not at this time, but maybe one day we'll get there. Okay, so, Chair, we finished with all the topics. I don't know if you wanted to leave it open for public comment.
Yes, let's move on. I'll reserve public comment for the end.
Okay.
Let's go into board discussion. If there's anything else that the board would like to discuss at this time.
No, I just appreciate that. It's a new tool for us.
Yeah.
It's very useful.
Yeah. I agree. I just was asking if you get on the list.
Okay, hearing none, is there any other future agenda item for y'all would like to discuss?
Election update as a commissioner education, you know, that'll be the next meeting.
Yeah.
We got elected or they.
Within just drop off the radio.
Well, he was talking about the levy certifications.
Right.
I'm gonna step up as the regional organization.
Right.
What do you need from us if we can help you to get those certifications done?
So the certification for us is doing our part, but it's really up to the county to be interested in getting those certified, or the city, right? So I think it'd be very important for you as a subject matter expert to have the cities understand that without that, they will not be able to reduce their flood insurance. And I don't. Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Looks like the next meeting we'll try to hold in August.
Oh, hold on. Did we have anybody else for public comment?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. I have 5 slides, but I just didn't want to put them out. But all this is great. With levy reconstruction and thousands of hours of negotiating with Mexico and everything else. But we have a tremendous amount of Texas right-of-way throughout the whole state. And what else do we have? We have the Gulf of Mexico, don't we? Where we can strategically place RO desalination plants strategically along the coast and utilizing our pipeline crews that we have in Texas. We have the best engineering surveying firms, oil and gas pipeline crews here in the state of Texas. And we can use the rainy day fund to establish a revolving fund to not only start the desalination plants strategically along the coast, piping in water, utilizing our right-of-ways, but at the same time, because we monitor our groundwater, I have the maps of our aquifers, we can do RO monitored water facilities and gauge them while we're building the desalination plants, bringing them inward for our residential, commercial, current economy, agriculture, wildlife, everything. And we got to remember, when you do these FEMA reports, the reason you need to involve the county is I used to be a right-of-way director for Precinct 1. At that time, everything was up to date, but they should have GIS, topos, and everything that can be submitted to FEMA to evaluate where are the high areas and the low areas? Because we're not a valley, we're a delta. People forget that. But we have the funding. We don't need to mess. It's great. I'm glad that we're reconstructing all these levees and everything because we do need to make sure that we don't have drainage problems. But immediately, we could start with the desal plants along the ocean, strategically utilizing our current workforce that we have in the oil and gas industry to bring water inward. And at the same time, when that water is shooting through the pipeline, you can put turbines in there, just like in the old days, but now modern turbines, which are going to turn and make what? Electricity that we can put grids in rural areas for our farmers and ranchers in case there's a power outage or something. We'll always have that water spinning. And when we put the desal plants on the ocean, you put side by side because those membranes have to be cleaned every once in a while. So you never stop because now you switch over to this one while this one's being cleaned. A continuous flow of clean water. Why do we want to negotiate for contaminated water from the Mexican mountains where they use all kinds of things like DDT and everything for their crops, going into our contaminated river, bringing it up in open canals to our water plants, watering our crops, when we can have clean, desalinated water, all right? And then redundancy with our old groundwater plants while everything's going into place. Why do we want to mess with that? Then we can even take that desal water and bring some of our levees up and stuff like the Falcon Dam, just a little bit, just for redundancy in case something does happen. But when I heard we spent $4 billion on the Colorado River, how many desal plants could we put on the ocean for $4 billion and already have water coming into our agriculture, our livestock, all right? Planting indigenous plants for our wildlife, taking care of our current economy and our economic growth that's coming. At the same time, those pipeline crews could be putting in pipelines to our grids, power grids, bringing in liquefied natural gas to power that. We have the best engine. I can see an engineer here from one of our local firms. We have the best engineering firms, the best surveying firms. Texas, human capital that could be working right now on these things, okay? I put a report together, even costed it out, and sent it to the governor. I know he received it. And I'm going to send it to everybody here because we need to work on this now. We have the fund, the rainy day funds, to set up, like I said, in a revolving fund because the cities are going to have to pay for water anyways and everything, everybody. So, boom, it's revolving. And we don't depend on the federal government because we have our own Texas right-of-ways. That way we can't have somebody stopping us. You know, I appreciate what IBWC is doing. I had a map from 1997 showing the area that these poor guys had to control with all the levees and this and that. But we need to act now. We need water now. We can mess with the Mexican government later in negotiations.
Thank you.
When I get the water from Mexico.
We're never going to get the water from Mexico. That's why I'm saying we need to do an alternative thing. All right. And our groundwater monitored. But the big thing is desalination on our on our coast, the Gulf, bringing in pipelines, utilizing our Texas human capital, putting them back to work to bring water to our precious economy. Now I'll shut up because I'm 16 years old with 54 years of experience, and I'm going to stick to that. Thank you. I'm actually older than JoJo White here. He could be my little brother. And this young man over here, security, known him for a long time. He's like my little brother too. Don't ever tell anybody I'm 70 years old.
Well,
All right.
this is Ann Cass. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm 78 years old. So
God bless you, young lady.
what I want to go back to is the question about the Hidalgo counting. I think it's the pump house by Benitez and I get certification and accreditation. I get them all mixed up because my brain is old, I guess. I don't know. But at any rate, I have, and other people have gone with me to talk to Raul Sassine with the drainage district. And it's been very difficult to engage him about why that has not been self-certified since, actually, well, it showed on your chart since 2011. I would like to recommend that you invite him to come to this meeting and ask him what he has planned. So maybe this board should have a little more push than a group of us from the Colonials. So, and I also want to thank you all for taking care of the Anzaldúa drain or the dam. It's good to see that progress is happening.
Does the board have a desired date for the tentative meeting in August?
Early.
Okay. Are Tuesdays still good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
What date?
We're thinking the first week, maybe as late as August 6th. I don't know if that's technically the first or second week. You look for.
What's the first Tuesday in August?
First Tuesday in August
It's the
is
6th.
the sixth.
Yeah.
Yes,
Maybe that week.
we're running August 6th. Is there a preferred location or would you like to keep it here? Okay.
I think you should keep it here. I mean, or there, wherever you are. Do it on your territory.
I have that.
Consider ourselves adjourned.
Yes. We were talking about.
Yeah, we're adjourned.
Because we got 16 people at first base. No one's Yes. So,